Madam, live.
Namaskar. We are in the fifth academic session. So, welcome to the fifth academic session of the national webinar on Indian literature and pandemic measures and management, which is being organized by the Department of Sanskrit, Jadavpur University, from 19th to 22nd January 2021. So now we are in the fifth academic session, and here the speaker is Dr. Department of Archaeology, University of Calcutta, and Professor Ratna, renowned Sanskritist. She is a retired professor of Department of Sanskrit of University of Calcutta. She is going to this session and she will deliver a speech. So welcome to both of them. And now I'd like to request Professor Dr. Ratna to take the charge of this session and conduct this session. Thank you, Madam.
Mulbu, namaskar. A very good afternoon to everybody, to listeners and fellow speakers and the organizers. I'm extremely thankful to the Department of Sanskrit for organizing such a unique webinar on the topic Pandemic and Indian Literature. I'm extremely thankful to the conveners and organizers of this webinar for inviting me and allowing me to share some of my thoughts with others. May I now request the lone speaker in this session, Dr. Rajat Sanyal, to present his thoughts and analysis. He will be speaking on pandemic and Indian literature as he has found in some archaeological and epigraphic evidences. Dr. Rajat Sanyal.
Namaskar. I'm extremely honored to be invited here by the Department of Sanskrit, Jadavpur University, to share my very preliminary views on the issue that is the subject of the inscription, that's the subject of this webinar, and my gratitude to the esteemed Chairperson, Professor Ratna, and my colleagues and teachers in the Department of Sanskrit, Jadavpur University. In fact, this brief talk would be based on one of the most well-known inscriptions of early India, which is a part of our curriculum in almost all the universities, particularly of Eastern India. And it has been under study for more than nearly 90 years, ever since its discovery. So please allow me to switch over to the presentation. This talk is based on the Mahasthan inscription, which was found from. Please read before I start. I request you to please read emergency in the place of calamity. I did not change the title, but as per all of the dictionary meanings available for this term, which occurs in this inscription, I see the word emergency, not calamity. So please read emergency for calamity here. This is based on the Mahasthan fragmentary stone plaque inscription, as it is known as. It is now preserved in the Indian Museum, Kolkata. This photograph has been taken from the Museums of India website. This is an information for the students, particularly, who are watching this session, please take a look at this repository of the Museums of India website, where you have a collection of a large number of archaeological artifacts and inscriptions, which are preserved in different museums of India. And this photograph is taken from that website only, of the Mahasthan inscription. It was discovered in 1931, precisely on 30th November 1931, by a cultivator at Mahasthan, which is a place currently located in the Shibganj Upazila of the Bogra district of Mahasthan. It's an inscription of 7 lines, a fragmented inscription, as you can see, written in early Brahmi and Prakrit language on a block of limestone. This is the image metadata that you see on the Museums of India website. Here you can see, if you can see my cursor, here you see the courtesy. From this link, you can directly see the inscription on the website, and by other links changing the accession number details, with a search window, you can browse through other materials. So this inscription, what does it talk of, will come a little later. But this is a well-known inscription, but possibly more well-known than it should be. I mean, it should have been, because as you can see, this photograph is from Wikipedia, which writes, if you see the red bordered portion, the Mauryan period Mahasthan inscription in Brahmi recording a land grant. So our well-aware populace is still not quite aware about the even well-known inscriptions, about the content of the well-known inscriptions of early India. This is one of the examples how these things are coming in public domain without carrying their actual purport or content. So this inscription has been studied, this particular record has been studied ever since its discovery in 1931 by generations of scholarship. It was studied by Devdutt Ramakrishna Bhandarkar. Immediately after its discovery, it was noticed by him. Then it was analyzed by Bainimadhav Bodua in 1934, just slightly after Bhandarkar, who published it in 33, then B.M. Barua in 34. Then it was again studied by Sudhakar Chattopadhyay in course of his study of the historiography of Maurya Empire, and then by one of the doyens of Indian epigraphy, D.C. Sarkar, who published its reading, which is the most widely used and accepted reading of it in 1965. It was also studied by G.M. Bongard-Levin, and more recently by Paula Tinti, who specifically dealt with the date of the inscription, as did Ahmed Hassan Dani in his Indian paleography. So it has been studied by different scholars, epigraphists and paleographists and historians, because of the content that this inscription possesses. So if we come to Mandarkars' reading of the inscription, this is his reading, directly taken from Epigraphia Indicas, volume 21, where this reading was presented by Mandarkar, who suggested that this inscription talks of certain measures by the local authorities under the order of a Mahamatra to supply specific things, paddy and coin, by a leader of a specific group called Sangvangyas, who were residing in Pundranagara or Pudanagala, as it is written in the inscription. These things were to be supplied during the outbreak of what he says, outbreak of distress, outbreak of distress in the town of Pudanagala. This was the reading by Bhandarkar, and he read in his text that three specific types of occasions of distress, or atyayikas, are mentioned in the inscription. Adangatyaika, Devatyaika, and Suatyaika. I'm not getting into the details of others' readings and directly jumping to D.C. Sarkar's reading, which was published in 1965. He's also talking about almost the same thing. Each of the words, please note that each of the words of this inscription, almost each and every word of the inscription has been critically scanned by scholars, and they came up with as many interpretations, varying interpretations as possible. So at some points, D.C. Sarkar differed from his teacher, Bhandakar. At some other points, Bhandakar's colleague and another epigraphist historian, B.M. Barua, he differed from Bhandakar. Then again, Sarkar also differed from Barua. This way, every scholar came up with new interpretations. But what is certainly known is this inscription talks of a city, a nagara called Pudanagala, which is identified with Pundranagar, which also has several numerous inscriptional and textual references from other periods of early India. This text is dated in the 3rd century BCE. Some scholars suggest it's 2nd century BCE. Let's not get into this controversy of 2nd or 3rd century BCE. Maybe we can come to this point during discussion. First point was it is talking of a city called Pundranagar. It is talking of a time of emergency or occasion of emergency or distress. Some measures taken by the state during the time of such distress or emergency are being talked here. Three of such emergencies or times of distress which are mentioned here are again read by D.C. Sarkar as Udagati Aika. Then the second Atyaika or Atyaika, which is not clearly read by D.C. Sarkar, has been read by Bhandakar as Devatyaika, and that has been accepted by D.C. Sarkar, as we will see shortly in his Sanskrit translation. And then Suatyaika, or and a third kind of Atyaika. So in his Sanskrit text, D.C. Sarkar clearly mentions these three kinds of Atyaikas or emergencies, which are being handled by a local authority under the order of the state, and these are caused by three separate factors. I'll come to the factors later on. So if we see the meaning of the term Atyaika is Monier Williams suggests that this means having rapid course, not suffering delay or urgent, requiring help, please note, as a disease or sushra. Then D.C. Sarkar takes it again as a matter of urgent disposal, derived from Atyaya, as Monier Williams also suggested. And here in this inscription, we see three different types of Atyaikas, as we have mentioned. What are these three? One is caused by water. The second one is caused by non-human agencies. And the third one is caused by winged animals or birds, maybe insects. The number 1 and number 2 are comparatively easily understandable than number 2. Number 1 is caused by water. It can be taken as something close to flood. Was it flood? We are not certain, but most of the scholars believe it is talking about an emergency caused by flood. The third one is certainly caused by winged animals, that is birds or insects. For me, this is possibly the most plausible element that might have caused such an emergency. Could have been locust, which we have enormous evidence even in the medieval and late medieval literature of having raised crops in the countryside of Bengal as in other parts of the country. But the second one is by non-human agencies. D.C. Sarkar takes it as an emergency or calamity caused by fire, since it is Devatyayika. But is it possible that it's also referring to some distress or calamity caused by disease? We have no clue to in the inscription to this question. Scholars have taken support of this inscriptional statement through corroboration from literary texts, particularly from Kautilya's statements of such six different causes of distress or emergency, Daiva Piranas, and they suggest that it's talking of these three are of those are three varieties of the calamities that we find mentioned in textual, I mean transmitted texts. But in inscriptional text, to my knowledge, this is possibly not only the earliest, but also the sole inscriptional reference to a calamity or emergency. Since this webinar's theme is on pandemic, we are not sure if by Atyayika, by any chance, they were talking about any disease. Certainly, even if they're doing so, they're not doing in the sense we now understand pandemic, because this pandemic, as we understand it now, could not have its inception before intercontinental trafficking, which was, of course, might have been there, but we do not have telltale evidence of these specific points on the occurrence and results of such pandemics from our epigraphical or archaeological literature. The only example I know of such work is an application of archaeological science based on bioarchaeological study of the Spanish flu of the 20th century, except that I am not personally aware of such studies in the archaeological literature. But the Mahasthan inscription provides one cue, possibly, leading to an examination of the problem of a condition of widely spread disease. If this second category talks of a disease by any chance and not fire, although we cannot be certain on either of the scores. Now, coming to the context of the thing, Mahasthan, as you know, as a student of archaeology, I couldn't resist the temptation of showing you the site from where this inscription was discovered. This is the map of Mahasthan in the context of other major early urban sites of Bengal, where you can see the red marked sites other than Mahasthan, the 6 of them, Bangor, Mongolkot, Chandrakatugad, Varibadashar, and others. This is the location of Mahasthan on the Karatvaya. These are the brief plans. These are the 2 areas of the Mahasthan archaeological site, which one within the citadel, the other one outside the citadel. And you can see the number of mounds they possess. We have not been able to excavate. I mean, the archaeologists working over there have not been able to excavate even half of the whole thing. I'm sure the excavations are being carried regularly, but so far these are the spots that have been partly or fully excavated. This is the plan of the city that was recently published by one of our friends, Colin Lefranc, in an essay on ceramics from Mahasthan, but he took the plan from it to give you an idea of the site and how it was excavated. This was the part earlier excavated under the France-Bangladesh Joint Archaeological Mission, and this is the second part, the Mazar area, that was excavated. Now they have excavated the eastern rampart wall, the entry to the eastern part of the Gad or the fort. The gateway complex has been restored. And this is the detailed structural plan of the Mazar area, which was excavated. A large number of artifacts were found from Mahasthan during nearly 2 decades of excavation now, but to my knowledge, not a single evidence pertaining to the incidents that is being referred to in the Mahasthan inscription has so far come to light. And this is, to me, not because of the fact that evidence cannot be there, evidence might be there, but we are not digging a site based on that particular problem referred to in the Mahasthan inscription. Archaeologists are excavating a site like Mahasthan, such a huge site like Mahasthan, with specific goals in their mind. And I'm sure the evidence of Atyayika referred to in the Mahasthan inscription couldn't have been an agenda of an archaeological excavation. If in future we find from the early historic levels of Mahasthan at least one specific layer where we can have evidence of a catastrophic flood, at least one of the Atyayikas referred to in the Mahasthan inscription might find its proper explanation. But so far, from the context of the site, we have no clue to this puzzle. And therefore, the statements and their interpretations in the Mahasthan inscription remain questions. This is rather, for me, this is rather a set of questions than a presentation before you. To see, we can come back to this during excavation, during our discussion, when, if the esteemed chair allows. Do we have any clue to, if not a pandemic, a kind of a widely spread disease condition to which the state is making its response? And that's why a permanent record in the form of a stone inscription is being circulated, and a permanent order is being given to a particular community, or the leaders of a particular community, or a place of a particular community, residing at a particular community, to combat such conditions of which disease could have been a subject. So I end up with this question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rajat Sanyal, for your illuminating and enlightening exposition of the Mahasthan Gaur and the Atyayikas, and particularly the clear analysis of the 3 types of Atyayikas. And I'm happy that you have said not calamity but emergency. You don't prefer the word calamity but emergency or distress situations. Once again, I say namaskar and good afternoon to everybody. And I think in this situation of pandemic, and while again I'm going to describe some of these things, we need a good Mangala-charana. Let me start with that. Om Jayanti Mangala Kali Bhadra Kali Kapalini Durga Kshama Shiva Dhatri Swaha Swada Namostute Jayatvang Devi Chamunde Jaya Bhutarti Harini Jaya Sarvagate Devi Kalaratri Namostute Namaste Astu Maharaudre Mahaghor Parakrame Mahabale Mahotsahe Mahabhayo Vinashini. Let us hope that the Almighty, the Parashakti, would dispel all our anxiety from pandemic. Now, my topic is drought, incidents of drought, famine and epidemics as found in narrative literature of Buddhist tradition. Khora, Anabhrishti, Khora, Durvikho এবং মহামারী অবস্থা, রোগ ইত্যাদি প্রাদুর্ভাব বৌদ্ধ গল্প সাহিত্যে যা পেয়েছি তার সামান্য আলোকপাত আমি করব. I will mention only a few instances, very glaring ones. So let me start with the first one, the matter of drought as found in narrative literature. Now, the Jataka collection, little more than 500, in the Jataka Katha, edited by Fausbull, the Jataka number 526, the Nolinika Jataka, refers to a severe drought which continued for 3 consecutive years. All cities and towns, all villages and all other vicinities, all farmlands looked fire burnt. No crops could be cultivated. Hence, there occurred famine. People lamented and cried for food all over the country. This is in the context of practicing penance by sage Rishyashringa. And then the most glaring and important description and remedial measures taken up by the Bodhisattvas is found in 2 stories of Aryashura's Champukavya Jatakamala. And the title of the Champukavya is Jatakamala. It has 34 stories, and Aryashura's time is determined 3rd century or early 4th century current era. Now I come to the story of Hasti Jataka, the story of the elephant, and the story of sacrifice, the Jagga Jataka, Yajna Jataka. Now, first I describe the Hasti Jataka. Extreme drought and famine killed about 300 people out of 1,000 within a very short span of time. This is described in the Hasti Jataka, where Lord Buddha comes as Bodhisattva in form of an elephant. This is the story number 30 of Aryashura's Jatakamala. The story number 96 in Avadana Kalpalata also has a brief version of it, where the elephant, actually Bodhisattva, is named Bhadra, the gentle one. But in Aryashura's Jatakamala, the elephant Bodhisattva does not have any name. The poet does not give any name to it. Now, out of those 1,000 people deserted by a wicked king and banished by that king, 300 died and 700 people survived. Seeing their suffering, emaciated bodies and their distress, this elephant Bodhisattva offered his own body as food to those suffering from hunger, thirst, fatigue, and mental distress. These poor people were banished by a bad king in the desert land where there was no vegetation, bon jangolo chilo na. And naturally, it was no cultivated land, no crops or grains were available. So this elephant Bodhisattva saved them with compassion, succor, and direct gift of pleasant words, which he talked to them, and food, which was his own body and flesh, meat, and water. So, kindness and philanthropy saved people suffering in distress, and not a small number of people, 700 human beings. Unfortunately, poets talk of men only, not women. So among 700, there was definitely some women also, at least. Now, so this kindness and philanthropy saved people suffering in distress and despair. Now I come to the story, Champu story, story number 10, the Yajya Jataka, the sacrifice Jataka. This is the title of the story. This is story number 10 in Arya Shura Jatakamala. Long ago, once upon a time, Bodhisattva, as a king, possessed all virtues, qualities, and righteousness. He was ruling in peace and harmony. His sovereignty was universally acknowledged. So no one opposed him, neither within the country nor in the other countries around his own kingdom. Yet, once there was a big drought affecting all parts of the country under his rule. As a remedy, when he called the big meeting with ministers and priests, the Vedic Brahmins and priests prescribed a solemn sacrifice of offering many hundreds of living beings. শত শত পশু বলি দেবার জন্য বিধান দিলেন এবং এই শত শত পশু বলি দিয়ে যজ্ঞানুষ্ঠানের বিধান দিলেন ব্রাহ্মণেরা এবং পুরোহিতেরা বৈদিক বিধান মেনে। But the king, the Bodhisattva, could not accept this as he did not agree with the cause and effect relationship of such a sacrifice and rainfall. Money sacrifice should be the cause. So killing so many animals, living beings, for creating rain, he found it not reasonable, not unfounded. Not reasonable or not founded by reason. He reflected long upon this and finally announced, he held another meeting and there he announced that he wants to hold and conduct a big sacrifice with human offering and offering at least 1,000 human beings, wherein all people, all of his subjects who resort to misconduct and immoral acts would be sacrificed. Not a single good person should be offered in the sacrifice. If anybody would try to do so, he, the king himself, would go for self-immolation. তিনি নিজে অগ্নিতে আত্মাহুতি দেবেন এই কথা ঘোষণা করলেন যদি কোনো সৎ নীতিশীল শীলবান মানুষকে কেউ বলি দেবার চেষ্টা করে। Now being afraid of this king's order and being afraid of killing and death, facing killing and death, all subjects in the kingdom behaved properly and not a single victim could be traced by king's men, army, police, spy, all people for offering in the sacrifice. The king, with his strong determination, overcame the old and unreasonable dogma of conducting animal sacrifice and so succeeded. Thereafter, rain came in time as a blessing from celestial beings. No epidemics broke out. Medicinal herbs thrived and enough cereals and crops grew. There was abundance of food and people followed the right path. I must say, people might think that these two stories, Hasti Jatako and Joggo Jatako, might also be available in the collection of Jatakos, now available only in Pali, but these are not found there. This Joggo Jatako is very scantily found in a few lines, only about the sacrifice, human sacrifice, and the king did not agree. Only these few lines are there. Now about drought. There is another reference. Now, and other type of stress an emergency might also occur. Mental stress due to isolation, distance from near and dear ones, insomnia, causing indigestion. Just see the medical analysis. Insomnia, নিদ্রাহীনতা, বদহজমের কারণ হচ্ছে এবং বদহজম থেকে উদরাময় অতিসার ইত্যাদি হচ্ছে. So insomnia, because of the separation and isolation from near and dear ones, প্রিয়জনের থেকে দূরে থাকার কারণে, সেটা প্রিয় শিষ্য, পুত্র, যে কেউ হতে পারে. So separation and distance from near and dear ones, insomnia causing indigestion, leading to blood dysentery and severe stomachache is described. So in that story, Jataka number 346 in the collection of 500 Jataka stories, available now only in Pali, of Varanasi. The 5 Vaidya families of Varanasi are noted in this Jataka titled Keshava Jataka. The remedy was mental ease, naturally administered by Bodhisattva. The remedy to these troubles was mental ease and peace of mind, without which medicines and patient's diet also could not cure illness. Now I come directly to some references of pandemic with the name pandemic, at the base of which also was drought, lack of rain. Now the disease is named in 2 stories of the Jataka collection, number 178, 178, and number 474, 474. The disease is Ahivataka Roga. Ahivataka Roga is described in these 2 Jatakas. Scholars identified this disease to be plague, identified or suggested this disease to be plague of Tarai or sub-Himalayan area. The Amra Jataka, that is number 474, speaks of this disease, of which one whole family, the extended family in those days, died. Only one young male member survived. How did he survive? He left his own home, he left the village and the nearby vicinities also. He fled the whole area and traveled long through an underground tunnel, Suranga, not overland. The suggestion here is made that on the land or surface area, exposure to the disease would be unavoidable. Leaving the country is not only suggested, but prescribed for survival in such emergent situations. Otherwise, the fate of the unfortunate tortoise at the Kotchop will recur. Now, this is described in the Kotchopa Jataka, number 176. What happened to the Kotchopa? He died. Why did he die? He did not leave his ancestral abode, where he was born, where his ancestors lived, all the relatives and kins, they were all living in the big family. But who did not leave his ancestral abode in a lake, in spite of the outbreak of the epidemic? Even though, because of which all other fishes and tortoise members of his family and all relatives had left the place. At the backdrop, there was a drought. And fishes and tortoise, all these water animals, have the instinct to realize or determine the risk of the advent or outbreak of natural calamities like drought, etc. So they had left. This tortoise died when the lake dried up because of the drought, extreme drought, and it fell sick with Ahivataka disease. Now, what is this disease, Ahivataka? The word Ahi generally means snake, but the lexical meaning is beyond snake. It can mean cloud, water, etc. So the disease involves monsoon diseases like fever, diarrhea, dysentery, cholera, and similar other infectious diseases. According to a work, Dharmapadhara Katha, in such an epidemic calamity, first die the flies, machi, makshika. First die the flies, then gradually the mice and rats, idur, choto bodo, hens, kukkuta, pigs, shukara, and cows and other cattle, gavadi poshu. And finally, the humans die. The bodies, that is corpses, of these dead creatures would naturally further infect others and aggravate the situation. Now I talk of another famine which is quite known to the Bengalis, thanks to Rabindranath Tagore. In his poems, one in Katha and another in Shishu work, the famine of Sravastripura is described in the Kalpadrumavadano. There was drought and no crops were grown and so on and so forth. On request of Lord Buddha in the assembly called on by him, even rich people kept silent, could not answer to Buddha's request for providing food. Even rich people, like the Shrestins, the business people, kept silent, and nobody came forward to arrange and provide food for the hungry subjects. Many of the small kings and rulers also surrendered, saying they did not have enough grains in the stock of their farms, since very little could be grown due to lack of rainwater. How could they give plenty of food required to feed the masses, so many people? In this situation, Bhikshuni Supriya, daughter of Anatha Pindada. The name Anatha Pindada is very significant to my mind because this Pindada, Pinda is not the Shraddha Pinda of the Hindus. You know, Pinda in the Buddhist tradition is the begging, all the food received as alms. ভিক্ষা হিসেবে পাওয়া গেছে যা খাদ্য সেটা হচ্ছে পিণ্ড। ওই জন্য that is why the Bhiksha Patra in Buddhist literature is called Pinda Patra. And Pinda Da means who gives Pinda, that is food. To whom? Anatha, to the orphans, to the weak and distressed people. So the daughter of this Anatha Pindada came forward, offered her homage to Lord Buddha, and said, those suffering and starving people are all her own children who are crying for food. She would go begging one handful of grain from every house in the state. Her begging bowl, Bhiksha Patro, would fill with the grains of the households collectively, which form her store, her granary. She being otherwise only a small, poor person. Thus, small amounts collected together with kindness, piety, compassion, and benevolence would feed the poor, hungry people of the land. And of disease and epidemic speaks another story in the Buddhist narrative literature. It is the story of the dancer Vasava. In this collection of story, Bodhisattva Vadana Kalpalata, the story of Vasava is available. It narrates Vasava suffered from A Bodhisattva Avadana Kalpalata narrates the story of Vasava, who suffered from smallpox, which came as a pandemic in the country. She was driven away by her relatives and kins and neighbors. The monk Upagupta, I'm talking very briefly, the story is long. The monk Upagupta found her lying on the road at a desolate place, and she was lying senseless. So monk Upagupta found her lying senseless in a desolate place on roadside. He gives her medical relief and saves her life with kind and compassionate treatment, not only physically but mentally as well. Now, to conclude, because the title of the seminar is Measures and Management. So these drought, famine, and emergency situations of epidemics, how were they tackled by people of reason and rationality? To remedy in such a pandemic situation, suggested explicitly or implicitly in the narrative literature of Buddhist tradition, points toward the urgent necessity of fellow feeling, compassion, charity, medical treatment, requisite behavioral steps like leaving a place or maintaining isolation and distance, arrangement of food and proper medicine, providing psychological relief for mental stress and in such situations with self-restraint and wise words of great men. So knowledge and experience of great men should also be utilized not only to console people but to strengthen their mental stability. Above all, rational and wise thoughts supplemented with and followed by requisite action, kind tolerance for suffering people, not only for drought, disease, and famine, leading to epidemics, remain in focus. I repeat, kind tolerance for suffering people, not for the situations of drought, disease, and famine, leading to epidemics, remain in focus. This is, I think, a message which we can collect from this narrative text of Buddhist tradition. Thank you very much. Namaskar.
Thank you, madam, for enriching us with your scholarly deliberation. And I also extend my heartiest thankfulness to Dr. Rajat Sanyal for his illuminating speech. And I think, actually, madam, there was a question asked by a participant, Pratika Sanyal, and what is that? Is the meaning of Atyantika or Atyayika or emergency changed according to the change of areas or place? So, Dr. Sanyal has answered it by writing, but he may now give the answer because we have 2 minutes more. Dr. Sanyal, please.
To enlighten us, but to my knowledge, we don't have specific reference in our literary tradition to specific emergencies at different points of time and place. What we have are sets, specific sets of emergency. We have in Arthashastra a specific set of emergency situation referred to. We have, even in this inscription, 3 of the categories of emergencies, which are again have reflections, which can have reflections drawn from texts. So I'm not sure if we have specific regional perspectives on the occurrence of Atyayikas. I'm sure Didi would be able to enlighten us on this with more references from texts, which I unfortunately do not have the competence to answer.
This is one is Atyaya, and that is Vipad, some danger situation. And the other word is Utpato. So in Sanskrit, we have both these words, Utpatiko, Utpato and Utpatiko, and Atyaya and Attoiko. These are all dangers caused by rain or flood or drought or indications of those. So as there are some beliefs, local beliefs, that if there is a big storm, then the lightning becomes reddish brown. And if the lightning is bright white, then there is risk of a famine outbreak. Durvikshayo Sita Bhavit. So, and there will be scorching heat, which may not be good for people's life or health. That is, then the lightning may be reddish. So these are the things. And you know, the behavior of the animals, as I mentioned in that story, that the creatures who live in water, they sense some sort of danger. Drought or flood or any type of natural change, I mean, unnatural situation in the nature surrounding them, they sense it. And some collections of sayings are there in ordinary pravachanas, and we come across those even in texts of grammar or etc. and so on and so forth. But these two words are very technical, this attoyo, and from that attoiko, situation arising out of any attoyo, that is danger, that is any fall, crossing the limit, oti oyo, from I dhatu, something going beyond, and utpato. And utpato are the signs in the nature which are indicative of some unnatural, unpleasant, and even dangerous situations which may come forth, risky situations. These are the things, and from literature it becomes clear how they are used in what story or in what context. Thank you.
Thank you, madam.
Once again,
So I think with this we can conclude today's session.
Thank you so much.
We are getting back tomorrow at 2:30 p.m. with the 6th academic session of this webinar. Thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you. Namaskar.